Okay, so greetings to everyone. Today, as we were mentioning earlier before the recording, is a very, very powerful day and powerful 2 days that are upon us, starting with tonight, which is called Hoshana Rabba. It's the culmination. It's the last day of Succot, where everything basically boils down to this last day. And it's interesting how it's celebrated. There are a number of customs that pertain to this last day that don't exactly make sense, and people that go through this last day's celebration, it's very hard to understand what the day is if we're just taking it on the literal level. If we're just viewing it on the literal level, it really doesn't make that much sense. So first of all, what is prevalent, and that's done, it's that there are five willow branches that are taken, and this is a minhag. This is a custom which goes back. We're going to speak about this custom and where customs actually come from in general, because it's not written down anywhere. It's called minhag nevim. It was a custom of the nevim, of the prophets, to take these 5 willow branches and to essentially smack them on the floor 5 times, and that's what's done. One of the things that are done, which is very we could say strange. Like, what's the point of doing that, right? So on the Kabbalistic level, the idea is to take the 5 branches correspond to the 5 levels of gevura, of intensity, of discipline, that is found or refound on this day of Hoshana Rabba, and it's about sweetening this intensity via these 5 branches. But we'll get back to that, and what is the story with having to sweeten anything. We thought it was already sweet. We're already in Sukkot. Like, what's the deal with now back to the thing? And furthermore, the Zohar says in Parshas Truma, the Zohar says that although we are sealed, we're written on Rosh Hashanah, and it says that tzaddikim are written and already sealed on Rosh Hashanah, the first of Tishrei. There are 9 days afterwards, and on the 10th day, on the day of Yom Kippur, is where we are finally where we are sealed. Of course, is where we are sealed on Yom Kippur, and on Yom Kippur is called the day of the we say Ktiva, the Chatima. We are written and then we are sealed on Yom Kippur. But the Zohar says that what is sealed and sort of like the decision is not given over to the collectors, and says that who the collectors over there in the Zohar, what the deal is over there and who's collecting exactly. But it doesn't get given over to those angelic entities, right? Until the day of Hoshana Raba. This day, okay, which is coming up in the States tonight, whatever, but for us, it's right now, happening right now. That decision of what was already written, Rosh Hashanah, and perhaps sealed, right? And then again sealed on Yom Kippur, is held on for these 7 days of Sukkot, right? And prior to that, 4 days in between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, until this day, until Hoshana Rabba. So it's called actually the day of the Pitka Rabba. It's called the day of the great sending of the petek. The petek is like the letter, where the big letter is being sent. So that's why we need what? Hoshana Rabba. We need a big, what we call, it's like coming down to this. It's like, you know what exactly. We know what it's like working really hard on even on a cake, right? You're working on it. You went to the store, you got all the ingredients, you worked in the kitchen, you got everything in place. And then we all know what it's like if we forget to turn off the oven just by a couple of minutes, right? gone, right? The same applies for all other foods, and the same applies for many things in our lives where we go through the motions, we go through so much preparation and so much hard work, but then at a certain point, or when it counts, sort of like we goofed up and we missed it, and like, oh man, gotta wait again and then do the whole process again. And that, excuse my French, like sucks, right? Like that is not a great feeling, right? When we missed it all, right? After all the hard work. So that's why it's called Hoshana Rabba. And we're going to get into this notion of what Hoshana Rabba means on a deeper level. But we're going through a number of the customs. So we've got the custom of taking the 5 myrtle, willow branches, striking them on the floor 5 times. And then the second custom is the custom to read the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. Now, why is that? Okay, just keep that question going. And then there's another custom to read the book of Psalms, the whole book of Tehillim, this evening, right? Because it's the last day of Succot, who the Ushpizin, the guest of honor of the evening, right? Every day of Sukkot, there's a guest of honor that are coming with the other great guests, the Zohar says, called the Ushpizin. So who's the guest of honor of today? David HaMelech, King David himself, with his instrument. And what did he write? He wrote Tehillim, singing to Hashem, beseeching Hashem. Actually, there's 10, the Zohar says 10 sounds of the Tehillim, 10 different expressions. It's not just one level of song of the Tehillim. There are 10 different types of calling out, which are there in the Tehillim. So we've got this custom of reading Tehillim. We've got the custom of saying the book of Deuteronomy, of Devarim, and the willows, right? Those are, and we've got another custom, which makes sense because in order to do all this night, there's a lot of hours in it to stay up the whole night. So to pull an all-nighter, right? So what is going on and what's the deal with this day, essentially, right? What is again, it's a day where there's an intensity here. It's like things are rehashed. After we thought that we put away the days of awe and we're in days of joy, we go back to days of like intensity, and it's a little melodramatic, right? It's like, did that, we're here. Like, what's the notion of mixing the two up, of coming back to it? So for this, we need to explore, and we're going to go into all these whys of these customs, right? Bezrat Hashem. So, but first we have to understand what is the level of joy that we are celebrating at all during the holiday of Sukkot. There's a mitzvah, there's a positive commandment to be happy, to rejoice on Sukkot. V'samachta b'chagecha. In fact, the Vilna Gaon says it's probably one of the most difficult mitzvahs to do, because the mitzvah is to be happy, to find yourself, to lively up yourself, to be joyous, right? All 7 days. And like, if you get like ticked off by the traffic or by someone there and that's going on, it's like, he's like, whoop. So he took it like it's a hard mitzvah to fulfill, according to the Vilna Gaon, right? He said it's the most difficult one. That's what he actually said. But they said
though that if you can remain happy all 7 days, that your whole year will wind up being a happy year. You'll have many happy
right. So exactly, and actually Kabbalistically, the idea of happiness, v'samachta, the word for v'samachta bechagecha ve'ayita, those words of rejoice in your holiday, and be, the last letters of that are the letters chatach, chet, taf, and chaf, which is the acronym for drawing down abundance, right? Like we say, poteach et yadecha, which the acronym for that, the last letters of that is also the same acronym.
Okay.
So that's what the Arizal says, that the joy of the holiday is a recipe. It's a conduit for drawing down abundance, right, into our life. So that's intense, because like you got to be joyous in order to draw down abundance. And like, you're on, boy, like, and girl, like, let's be happy. Like, let's go. Are you gonna be happy? Like, it doesn't work that way, right? Can you be happy when you're like, I'm what if I miss it? What if I'm not happy? What if someone ticks me off? Then you're already not in the state of mind of joy, right? It's like counter productive to think in that in that way, right? It's like when you're like, be happy, you're like, okay. But you ever have someone tell you smile, you're like, okay, it's like it's like, that's intense. You're just telling me to be happy. I'm like, I'll do it. You don't really feel internally happy, right? So but obviously the Torah is telling us to be happy, and we're supposed to find that joy. And where does that joy really, truly, truly come from? The answer is, the Talmud says that the joy of Sukkot comes from the forgiveness of Yom Kippur. And the joy of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, which was the epitome of joy, it says in the Talmud, whoever did not experience this joy of the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the joy of the libation of water, never saw joy in their life. They never experienced joy in their life. If they never saw the joy of the libation of water, they never saw joy in their life. And the Talmud continues and explains to us what was going on in that joy. It says that the joy was for those sinners, literally, it says them chotim, they were there, and they were like, oh, we're so glad to be here. And we're here right now, and God is the essence of good, and He has forgiven us on Yom Kippur, despite being this, and here I am. Hashem is so good, and I'm joyous in this experience, right? Because there were those who were, almost like the tzaddikim, the perfect individuals. They were happy, but those who were really happy were the Baalei Tshuva. They were called the masters of Teshuvah. A master of tshuva. That's what Baal Tshuva really means. To be a master of tshuva is like to be a master of qigong, to be a master of of this practice or that practice. You're like, wow, you're a master. But what's a Baal Tshuva? You're a master of tshuva. That's what a Baal Tshuva is. Whether you like that title, and it says that Mashiach is going to cause the tzaddikim to become Baalei Tshuva, to become masters of tshuva. So what's the joy? The joy is tshuva. The joy is the joy of the return, and the joy of the connection, which is forged and even more than that, not just forged, but revealed as it was already there, and it's always been there. And it has never been severed or separated ever, despite the seeming separation of the negativity, which we did. But even the negativity was just a stepping stone, and it's just it's an unconscious mistake that we've made, and that we are the masters of tshuva is about finding the inner point of what is found inside, right? So what is found inside? And again, what's that joy? The joy is the joy of the libation of water. What is the joy of the libation of water? So in the temple times, there were two types of libations that were brought on the altar, on the mizbeach. And there were two holes that were going down into it says into the center of the world, in the center of the earth, right? But there's a rock over there, which is called the Even HaShetia, which is called the rock of what? Of shtia, of drinking, in fact. right? Or from the word shtia, from the word actually comes, there's two meanings to it. One is that from the word hushtat, that the world was formed on it. But another word, even hashtia, is the rock of drinking, right? What's going on? There's the libation of wine that went all the way down into on this rock, right? And there was the libation of water, which was right next to it, which was only done during the 7 days, sorry, not on Shabbat, 6 days of Succot, right? And but the libation of wine was brought every single day. There was wine. The Talmud actually stipulates what type of wine needs to be brought, and the Gemara in Menachos says that it has to be 3-year-old wine, and it has to be aged, and it has to be this like quality grapes. In other words, we actually learn a lot of winemaking skills from what was brought onto the Mizbeach. That's an interesting side note. But the libation of water was this libation which just happened once a year. And it was the source of so much joy. Whereas we look at it and we think, what makes someone happy? It's people are like, well, wine, wine is sophistication. It's like, it gives you a certain high. It puts you on right? Gives you a certain feeling of whatever. And yet the joy was not the joy of the wine. It was the joy of the water. What is the joy of water that supersedes the joy of the wine? So it's explained that we've got two parts of ourselves as human beings, and also collectively in the temple there was what was called the outer altar, which is called the altar of the nechoshet of copper, and there was the inner altar, which is the altar of the incense, which was a smaller altar, right? That is spoken about in Parshas Truma regarding the building of the temple, and they represent two parts of our hearts. There's the outer part of our heart, and there's the inner part of our heart. What's the outer part of our heart? The outer part of our heart is the part that we become excited and externally inspired, we could say, by what is going on more outside of us, right? We get what we call like fired up by I'm going to be doing this today, or I'm going to be meeting my friend, which is great, which is awesome, right? But it doesn't mean necessarily that it's all going to go as well as we think that everything will happen exactly the way we want it to happen. But the external desire and the external part of our heart is there on a certain level, and we could have joy, that level of joy, from that side of the outer temple and the outer part of our hearts, which is joy, which is we're happy, it's great, but it's external joy. And it's not just about who I'm with and what kind of a conversation am I having, or what type of a hike am I taking, but then it goes to the inner part of the heart. It's how am I interpreting this to me? How am I already joyous this without the externality, right? And for a human being, that's very difficult. And that's why we usually start out with the outer altar and we go to the inner altar, because like the Maimonides says that a human being is just affected. That's just our nature by the people around us, by the culture we grow up in, the type of home that we're conditioned. And our mind just biologically is just conditioned to the externalities of life, of the world. And we are affected by the joy which comes from the externalities which are there, right? But to come to the inner level of joy is very, very profound, right? And yet it's so simple. Yet it's just being you. It's just being you without the conditioning of the outside. But that's the most difficult thing ever in the world, because to get out of the conditioning of the outside, we have to be really in tune and really trust and really connected to our inside. And what was the inner altar? It was the altar of the incense that just went straight up with no fanfare, no noise, and it just connected, right? In a pure state of ketoret. Ketoret actually comes from the word in Aramaic, which means to be connected. Kesher, keter, and kesher, kuf tet resh, and tet is interchangeable, where ketoret is going up, 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 but it's really that we are becoming really connected, right? And isn't that reminiscent of sitting in the sukkah? It says that the sukkah was the smoke of the ketoret, which is what we do inside of the sukkah. We're sitting we're basking in the canopy of that ketoret, of that connection on the holiday of Succot, where that custom, and again, we're going to now explore where that custom came from, of the libation of water came from. Okay, now the libation of water is not written anywhere in the Torah straight up to say you shall have the libation. It says regarding wine, it does say that in the Torah, right? That when a sacrifice is brought, you bring wine with it. Like meat and wine go well together. It's like on all levels, right? But it doesn't say anything about the water. Okay. Where do we get that from? It's called a custom. It's called a custom. And where does it come from? So Rabbi Akiva in the Talmud tells us, Rabbi Akiva was the great master of the oral Torah, and he was the great, what we call Baal Tshuva, the master of return. There was nobody like him, like Rabbi Akiva, in the whole, as a sage that did what he did, right? At the age of 40, he left everything behind. He left all of his conditioning. He left, and he's like, I am going to dedicate myself wholeheartedly to studying, to learning, and to figure out who I am. And guess what? He became someone who is just unbelievable, like what he did, what he accomplished. The whole oral Torah, it says everything goes really kula aliba de Rabbi Akiva. It all really follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And when did he pass? Actually, very interesting. When was his day of passing? Yom Kippur. That's his yortzeit. That's his hilulah. He passed on that day. So anyways, what does Rabbi Akiva? He says, I'll tell you where the libation of water comes from. This custom, which was instituted by prophets and was done in the temple for hundreds of years, right? Is there something that they already knew, right? It's a tradition, but it's not written down anywhere. It's something which is received, right? In that form. He says, I'll tell you where it comes from. In the readings that we do for the sacrifices of the days of Succot, where we bring 70 bulls, it says, or oxen, for the nations of the world and for the whole world, like everything becomes uplifted in a tone. But anyways, where that's written, there are nuances in 3 days, right? It goes through the 7 days, and it says on this day you should bring this many, and that's actually what we read in the Torah every single day. We read that so on the first day you bring this many of the sacrifice, and the second day you bring this. So anyways, on the second day, on the 6th day, and on the 7th day, there are discrepancies in the wording of these verses. So where it says on the verse niskehem, usually it says nesachea. Nesachea refers to the wine libation. Nesacheh, nesech means the wine is brought out. And that's the way it's written basically throughout. But on the second day, it says niskehem. Okay. On the sixth day, it says, it's one second. There's an extra yud which is added to why am I blanking out this second? Can you, yeah, thank you. So there's an extra yud which is added, and two. Okay. Okay. Yeah, unsacheha. Usually it says veniska, so there's an extra yud which is there. On the second day, on the second day, it says bemispar. Wait, sorry. Niskehem. Yes. Okay. Nesachea. So niskehem, there's an extra mem, which talks about the wine libation. Nesachea talks about the wine libation. There's an extra yud. And then on the seventh day, there's an extra mem, which spells out mayim, which is water, right? Now, and just to finish this off on the what's the extra mem bemisparam? So mem yud mem. So Rabbi Akiva learned this out. Why there's an extra, because it says Rabbi Akiva was actually counting all the letters, and he was called a sofer, a scribe that counts all the letters. And it says that the rabbis that were great, they counted the letters. In other words, they were very observant of everything that was there, that was written, and why it was written in that way, and what's the nuance that's there, and what's the depth of it. So they're actually called scribes that are there, and we'll get to that in a second. So mem yud mem is found in a way of remez. It's a hint. Exactly, it's a hint. It's not written out directly. It's a hint. And Rabbi Akiva said, what we could say, something that we could remember from this? King Solomon says that those that love Hashem, right? Boz yavuzulo, they will mock him. Boz comes from the word, they will mock someone that is true to themselves, true to their ideals. They'll look a little crazy sometimes to the outer world. Like, why are you acting that way, man? Like, why can't you just come with me to a party? Why can't you just wear that? And why can't you just do that? What are you doing over here? Like, you're like, no, like I'm actually trying to connect, to refine myself, and so the word is boz yavozulo. They're saying like boz from the word booze, like boo, like comes from that word booze. Yeah. So what's the letters for that? Bet vav zayin is the letters for mayim. On the second day, kemishpatam, right? Niskehem, sorry. Nesachea, the yud, and kemishpatam, mayim. At the sixth, booze, bet, vav is the sixth day, and zayin is the seventh day. So so we see the hint for water from that verse in Song of Songs. Like King Solomon says, that those that are delighted by the connection to the Creator, to Hashem, they will be mocked by the world. Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of Rabbi Ari Shishler. He has inspiration.
Okay.
Today. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but he has a very good and short explanation of the Shweva ceremony, the Beit Shweva.
Simcha Beit HaShoeva.
Have it here.
Okay, so maybe after.
What?
Maybe after. I just want to concentrate. No, after we'll bring it in. Yeah, it doesn't exactly pertain to
Right.
exactly. Thank you though. I want to see it after though. So the word is buz, which means to mock, right? And the word for why do people become like mock or what's the idea of that? It's because again, the outer world mocks something which doesn't follow its ways. And if you just don't, if you're not exactly following the trend and the social, so then you're odd. You're out. But what's the word for water? Buz, beit vav zayin, which is mayim. What is that about? It's about connecting to your inner truth, which is not on the outside. And sometimes on the outside, they will mock a person who's following, not only mock a person, it's basically going upstream. And that's what Avram Avinu did, right? Avram is called Ever Hanar. He was on one side of the world and everyone was going on the other side of the world. And we as the Jewish people are really that standing out, like basically as a sore thumb for like all of history, and basically the rest of the nations are like, what are you guys doing? Why are you talking about God over here? What's going on? We're okay. We want to be pagans. And we know that monotheism started by Judaism, right? Belief in one God. And even after monotheism, like all of this hatred for the Jewish people, right, by the other two major religions, is that, well, why don't you do things our way? Why do you want to do things in your way? And booze, like we're mocked, right, by the rest of the world, because what is it all about? It's about connecting to our inner truth. Our inner truth is something which is often not compatible with the external, with the rest of the world. Yet we are meant to bring that inner truth, that water, that joy which is found inside, and bring it outside, rather than having the outside coming into the inside, which is that joy of wine, right? We're supposed to do what? We're supposed to take that joy of the water, which is that truth of our existence, which any great things that ever happened in the world only came from people that listened to that inner truth. Avram Avinu is the perfect example for that. He heard God and his father was like, what the heck? What are you doing? I'm going to throw you into the fire, literally. And Isaac and Jacob and everyone, Moshe and everyone are basically going against the stream. Yet it sounds like a very intense process. But on the same level, it's called joy. It's the state of joy. It's the state of going against this, which is what we do basically on Succot. We take a makeshift house, right? And we put it outside of it and we eat there, and we're joyous in this place. But what do you like? You could be in your house eating, you could be, it's a lot more comfortable. What's the joy of the whole Succot? It's that transience. It's that joy doesn't come from the outside, from what the weather even dictates, or from what's going on from what they think about me, if I'm crazy or not. But I'm sitting over here and I'm finding joy despite what anyone does. I don't give a flipping, like, not doing in that type of a, but it's, I am happy. I am just like, I'm joyous, right? And if you don't want to be joyous, that's your problem. That's, if you want to find joy from other things, go ahead, like, all good. But the joy comes from the inside. But where does it really come from? That joy. So going back to that joy comes from the level of teshuvah, of return. The joy of Sukkot comes from the level of returning, where we once again tap into our inner truth, that our inner truth has always been connected and is connected, despite what we think is going on in our lives and all the things that are messed up and things that we did. The truth is, there's a constant connection that we have, that if we tap into it, then we could shift what's going on the outside. And so going back to Rabbi Akiva, who's called a master of sofrim, of scribes, right? What did he do? He found the mem yud mem inside of right? He found that. What does that mean? He was called a sofer. So the Sefer Yetzira says that there's 3 ways that God created the world. The Sefer, through a book. Sipur is a story. And Sofer is a scribe. Right? The Sefer Yetzira says that God created the world through the book, through the story, and through the scribe. And in many ways, we are also in our world, personal world, is a world which is, there's the book, there's our book, where you look back into your book. What happened when you were in 2nd grade? What happened when this, and who were you born? It's a book. Zet Toldos Adam. It says in Divrei Hayamim, in the book of Chronicles, that says Zet Toldos Adam. This Toldos Sefer Adam. This is our book. Each person has their book, and we have our story. What's our story? Sometimes the story is not what's written in the book. We're making up the stories to either compensate, or we don't exactly follow that book, right? And be proud of even that mistake in our life that was like, why the heck did that happen to me in 2nd grade? And why did and we're like, no, I don't want that anymore. And so we avoid our trauma. We avoid our pain. We want to run away from it. And we create calluses. And multiple, right? And to the point that our hearts are hardened, our minds are not clear, and we can't connect to ourselves. Certainly we can't connect to others, right? And why? Because the story is just a different story, right? The story is not in sync with what's written in the book. It's a story, and we're like, I don't like the book. I want this story. And we go to psychologists, and we take different substances, and we do this and that, and everyone's like, what is going on? Why am I like feeling so separated? Because your story and your book are not congruent. You're not proud of your story. It's your story. Your story. God put it all perfectly. Every part of the story. Every single detail. Every detail is the book. And it's yours. Right? And then we've got the scribe. Right? And then we've got the scribe. What's the scribe? Scribe is what we're writing, how the ending is going to look like, how we're interpreting the stories that went on in the back of our heads, that went back that were there from our past, right? We take those stories, and now we could write, and we could interpret things, and we could find meaning to things that happened in the past. So we need the scribe to tell the story properly, right? And who's the scribe? You, right? The world was created through a book, the story, and the scribe. Rabbi Akiva is called the great scribe. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe is called Sefer Rabba. He's called the great scribe. Divrei Sofrim, the words of the Sofrim, of the scribes. What's going on over there? Why are these great? Why is Rabbi Akiva called the scribe? Because they're able to look at the story of the book of the Torah with all the divine letters that are coming through and the whole story, and they are explaining what's going on over there. It's not just a story that they are going to the root of it, in a sense. And the root of it is what is called the oral Torah, which is that notion of the written Torah, which is the Bible, which is written down, and then the oral Torah, which is again Moshe, right, is the source of the written Torah. But we say Rabbi Akiva was the source of the oral Torah. And in on the level of the oral Torah, he's called, both of them are called Sofrim, right? But he's able to understand the depth and to defy even what it says externally, to defy the externality of what we think is just written over here. Like when phylacteries, which I don't even know what that means in English, but tefillin, let's say, like, how should you make tefillin? How are you supposed to sit inside of the sukkah? What is matzah? Like, it's not defined in the Bible. It's not defined in the Torah, the written Torah. The oral Torah goes ahead and defines it for us and explains for us what is the depth of what all this means, how big, you know, how tall it needs to be, matzah, how many minutes it needs to be cooked, all that. Well, the Torah doesn't say that. So how do they know that? And the answer is because they're able to go to the level of the author. They're able to understand the source of it. But what is this really telling us on a deeper level, right? And how does it relate to this day specifically? So it tells us that, what do we do today? Again, going back to the 4 customs that we have on Hoshana Rabba, one of the customs is to say the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. Why? What's the deal with the book of Deuteronomy?
It's a recap of all the rest of the Torah.
Okay. Yes.
And it's a Moses' words, what he assimilated.
Very good, right? So in a sense, we've got the 5 books of Moshe, but we've got really the 4 books were divinely channeled through Moshe, right? And the 5th book is the book that basically Moshe, it says, said it by himself, but he didn't say it by himself, but he became such a receptacle, such a conduit for the divine presence, that even what he said was divinely said. When he said, "V'natati gishmechem be'itam," I will give you rain at its proper time. It says that Moshe says, "I will give you rain." He was basically speaking for Hashem, but he was saying this himself. In other words, he incorporated himself and his divine self on such a perfect level, right? That he was able to just basically be the divine presence, be within a physical body. And in a sense, where does that come from? That comes from teshuvah. That comes from returning back to our essence, to our source. Coming back to our source, it means coming back to our author, to who we are. And Moshe's the author, but he's really just saying Hashem's words. And what do we do on Hoshana Rabba? What do we do on this day? We come back to the level of joy, which was felt, which was expressed on Yom Kippur, celebrated on Sukkot, but then on the last day, we're going to the epitome, to the apex. Again, what was sealed, it was already sealed on Yom Kippur, and it's about to be delivered. Yet, what does that mean on this day? It's delivered on this day means that on this day, we go back to not just what's written in our potential on our book. It's called the day of the great writing, day of the great Petek. It's not just what's written there. It's we have the ability to essentially not just write what's there, but to write the future of how we want this year to look like, how we want our lives to look like, how do we really want to be, right? We have the ability to do that. It's not just we went through the motions on Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur and like, see ya, I'll come back for 2 days a year next year, right? But up until then, I'm on my own. Thank you. I don't need, whatever. I'll do my own thing. It's like, are you kidding me? You're walking with Hashem. You're walking with God the whole year. You want that presence. You don't want the external to dictate your life. You want the internal to dictate your life. You want the story that's inside of you, that's the author that's inside of you, to write the future, to be the narrator, not to have someone else narrating my future, my existence, right? My past narrating my presence and my future, right? I want the present and to narrate it. I want the now. I want to be here, and I want to be now, and I want to be present to Hashem's fullness right here. And that book of Dvarim, which is customarily read, the book of Deuteronomy, is a recap, but it's Moshe really expressing that truth which we're connecting to, which we aspire to be like Moshe, to be that juncture between the written Torah and the oral Torah. Basically, we have it in Deuteronomy. It's that juncture between these two worlds. And the truth is that the oral Torah is even higher in a sense, because it's telling us, it's explaining to us what is written in the written Torah. But that only comes about through the depth of digging deeper and finding that truth of the water, right? Which comes from where? Mimayane Yeshua, which comes from, in Jerusalem, there's a place called the Gihon Valley, which is right outside of the old city. And in that place is where the water actually came underneath the Temple Mount, and it was able to rise up, and that's where the water was drawn up for the Kohanim when they washed their hands. But they were drawing down this water from where? From going all the way deep down, like all the way deep down, and going from that place, which we call mima'amakim, from the depths. I call out to you, which is what we do on Yom Kippur. We call out from the depths, right, of who we are, and we draw that water up through that ascent, right, progression from going upwards, and that's that process of teshuvah, of return, but yet that process of return was such a celebration in Jerusalem in that time. It was such a celebration. It says whoever did not see that celebration never saw joy in their life, because that celebration is a celebration which was found in Jerusalem, right? And from there, the Talmud says that it was so bright that there were lanterns of oil that was lit, and there was such a brightness that didn't come from the outside; it came from the inside. And when you see someone that is doing their mission, that is truly connected, there's joy there, there's light there, right? As opposed to you see someone's face and there's no affect, there's no why, because panim is the face, but it's also the panim of what's going on inside of us, right? And there was such a joy because of what was affected on Yom Kippur. There was such a joy over there that the light was not from the outside, it was from the inside of all these souls, of all these people that were there doing their mission, doing their job, and they were all lighting up the night together, right? That's that level of teshuvah, of return. And that brings us to the second custom of what we do on Hoshana Rabba. We say the book of Tehillim. The book of Tehillim, of Psalms, was said by who? By none other than the great King David, which there was no one like King David that is called the master of teshuvah, the master of return, more than King David, where he thought everything is over after he took Bathsheba as a wife, and he killed Uriah Hitti and put him out to war, and he got killed, etc. And he was like, and God tells him through the prophet God, like, you know what you did? And he was like, oh man. And he goes into a state of deep soul searching that the Talmud says really King David was not meant to like make these mistakes. He was such a perfect person, such a tzaddik, but he came down to the world to teach us the paths of tshuva, to teach us the path of return, that no matter where a person is, no matter what they do, they could return. There's never a closed door. There is always that truth, right, of our neshama, of our connection, right, of that ma'ayan, of that living source of water which is found inside of us. It may be a little bit concealed, but when we dig deep enough, which is what the Psalms of King David is, they unearth what is there already, and they make it stronger, right? They make that author, again, of who we are, that much more vibrant, that much more in tune with who he or she is, by getting the stuff out of the way, getting those rocks and getting, the earth, the schmutz, we say, right? And connecting to that living source of water. So that's the second custom. The third custom is to stay up all night. Where does that custom come from? So there's a lot of Kabbalistic things that are connected to it, but I will just share that it has to do with the notion of, if we make staying up all night, really, what is the deal of staying up all night? I mean, staying up all night is that, like, unless you're a teenager or, in college, it's, yeah, then, you stay up all night, but it doesn't make sense, because night is a time for sleeping, and that's the way our bodies work, and that's the way, that's usually what's done in the rest of the world, unless you're in college, right? But then what do we do on this day of Hoshana Rabba? We're basically like, we are going to defy the outside. I'm going to defy the night. I'm going to defy the norm of society, the external, I'm going to say, right? Not by drinking all night, right? But by actually drinking wine all night. I'll say it that way. Not just by drinking wine all night, right? But by drinking water all night, which the Torah is called water, right? Because the drinking on this night is a spiritual drinking. Again, it's like the joy is not in the wine. The joy is not in the substances that's going to make you happy, right? It could elevate you, and people become addicted to those things that make their mind quiet for just a little bit and let them come in tune with themselves. But it's a crutch for truly finding that inner flow of water. So we stay up all night, right? And that's the thing. It's like, basically, I'm going to defy what I think. I'm like, I'm so tired, I want to go to sleep. Well, let me go a little bit deeper. Let me connect to the words of Tehillim. Let me connect to the words of Deuteronomy and listen to those words. Listen to those words. Listen to the author inside of me, and not listen to what's coming from outside of me. I want to meditate on those words. I want to connect to those words. They're water for me, right? And that brings us to the fourth custom. What's the fourth custom? The fourth custom is taking the willows, and it says where the willows, where do they grow? The willows, they grow on water. That's where the willows are. The willows grow on water, nachal, right? They grow on water. And what's the deal with the willow tree, really? So it says that. And it's actually called the day of the willow tree, of the striking of the willow tree. That's what this day is called, right? But what's the deal with the willow tree? It's actually the most simple one of the four species, right? Of the that we take, right? We take the etrog, the citron, which is the most beautiful, the most expensive, smells good, it tastes good. We have the lulav, which is from the date tree, and technically tastes good if we have the dates, right? And then we have the smell of the myrtles, of the hadassim. But then we have the fourth one, the fourth species, which is the willows, and
Doesn't smell good.
Doesn't taste good, right?
But you make aspirin out of it.
Very good. Make aspirin out of it. Okay. I don't know how healthy that is, but it helps you for a little bit. So what is the deal with the willows? So today I happen to love going to a certain place in nature here around Tzfat, sit there and to meditate next to a stream where there are a number of willow trees. And every year I go there and I pick my willow trees, my willow branches for this day. And before picking the willows, I was meditating in that spot, and it really came to me like these trees that are so firmly planted, they're planted in the stream. Like as the stream is flowing, they're in that stream, right? They're in that stream. Whereas basically no other trees are in the stream like that, that are able to grow in that way and not interrupt the flow, because there are other trees that if they would do that, they would stop because of the amount of water that they take up. They may cut off that stream, right, if it's planted in that way, but not the willow tree. And it occurred to me that, wow, this is actually in a way what King David says at the beginning of the first Psalm. A tree that's planted right on the stream of water, which will give its fruit in its proper time. The willow tree doesn't give its fruit, but it's planted in that stream. And what is the giving of the fruit? What is the willow tree really doing? What is its fruit? It's the perseverance of staying in the game, although the fruit is not apparent at the time, in the now, in the current state, but yet something happens, and staying in it for the long haul, like something happens, right? And the willow tree, the arava, comes from the word arev. Arev means tasty, and it also means arvut. Arvut means interconnection. It means an interconnection and an obligation, so to speak, for the interconnection of the world. Like there's a concept called arvut, like there is Kol Yisrael arevim zeh lazeh, that all of Israel are guarantors for each other, right? So, and it works like that also in Jewish law and halacha. If, let's say, someone cannot do a certain mitzvah, not all of them, I can do it for someone else because we're guarantors for each other. The idea of the guarantors comes from the word arava, Arevim, the willow tree, is a guarantor, right? It's a guarantor, which is very interesting, that in the temple, every single day, they took willows, and they took a whole bunch of, and the Kohanim, the priests, surrounded the Mizbeach 7 times, or maybe it was 1 time, sorry, 1 time. And on Hoshana Rabba, they surrounded the Mizbeach 7 times, and going around the willow trees, and taking finally the willow trees, and right, we have the custom to take them and to bash them, right, to strike them 5 times. The very, very mysterious and very deep idea of what these willows are all about. They also represent the simpletons, the simple people. They represent that part of ourselves which is simple, which has no taste and no smell, and it's not that attractive. It's not that interesting. It's kind of like boring. Like, we want the fanfare. We want the next thing that's on our, that's drawing the attention from us, that has the shiny outside there, right? We want that. Like the etrog is like beautiful. Wow, smells so great, so majestic, right? The lulav, etc. They're all taking up the attention, but the arava is not that. Is very much doing its thing. The simple one is actually the one that's the greatest one. The simple one is actually takes the show. Like at the end, that one is the one that wins. Like, we think that, you know, the big horse that's so fancy, and it's that one that has that persistence, that simplicity, that's in that stream of water, that's in the game, that's going through that process of reconciling himself or herself, that Baal Tshuva, that has no taste and no smell in the current state that they're in, where they feel like nothing. They feel like junk. They feel like they're worthless. They don't mean anything. There's no point, right? Of why am I here? They feel that. They're humbled. And they're broken, right? They're bashed, right? They're bashed. Yet that bashing, that unearthing is then laying the foundations for amazing things that are to come. The humble willow tree is the one that, through its bashing, again, through that humility and that persistence of adhering, you know, to that, staying in the game basically, and going in, being bashed again 5 times, right? The five. So there's 5 levels. Kabbalah speaks about, there's 5 gevura, 5 levels of gevurot, right? Which come from the state of malchut, of kingship. That within malchut is basically what we do the entire holiday season of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. We're building the kingdom. We're building malchut, is basically what we're doing on a spiritual level, right? On a Kabbalistic level, we're basically doing that. On Rosh Hashanah, we're crowning Hashem, we're drawing that down. And here we are on the last day of Hoshana Rabba, where the malchut is like really drawn down through the 7 days of Succot, and it's in the here and in the now. There's intensity there. That's gevura. And the gevura, it says that there's 5 levels of gevura. 5 levels of gevura, like the 5 levels of enunciation that we have in our mouth. We have 5 levels of expression, that we could say that in the 22 letters of the alphabet, at least in Hebrew, they're divided into 5 forms of expression, which are called the 5 gevurot, which takes the simple sound, which is the idea of chesed, of kindness, which is on the level of zer anpin, on the level of what is above the 6 sefirot above it, which is that flow of kindness, which comes from above. That's called the sound, right? Yosef is called the sound. And King David is also Malchut, is now is about enunciation, right? Expression, 10 forms of expression, Tehillim, saying the words, etc. specifically. And within that, there is intensity, there's gevura, there's constriction. Because the world of Malchut, which is the receiver, and again, we're all receivers as humans, and in the world there's the possibility of us being affected by what is outside of us, and there's that intensity that goes on inside of us, and we need to sweeten that. We want to sweeten that. We want to say yes to a lot of great things in our life, and stop being so negative to so many things that in our life that we're constantly negative about, constantly down talking to ourselves, and constantly self-criticizing ourselves and others, and being in a state of lack, of constriction, right, etc. We want to take that, and we want to say those 5 levels of constriction, of gevura, that is not serving me. It's just not serving me anymore in my life. Am I ready to give them up? Am I ready to sweeten them? And we do that with a willow tree. It's a minhag, it's a custom of prophets that was instituted, that again, it's not written anywhere, but it's found from a very deep source, almost psychologically sound level, that during this day, after doing all this inner work, we've got a part of ourselves that on the day of Hoshana Rabba, where everything is already decided, we did all the hard, and it's about to be given over, do we still doubt ourselves? Do we still say, what's the year going to be like? And that's the idea, that it's going to be delivered, but like, do you trust that it's going to be delivered to the greatest place? Are you part of it? Are you even doubting that? And Hoshana Rabba is like, I'm ready to give. Are you ready to receive? Because everything the next day after Hoshana Rabba, on Shabbat, it's like that level of Rosh Hashanah, on the level of kindness, that we are implanted, Kabbalistically speaking, with all the amazing things. And that becomes almost like we become pregnant with all that is going to manifest, everything that's going to happen in the subsequent year until Passover, until the next holiday, right? Which is like that state of pregnancy according to Kabbalah. So are we ready to receive those 5 levels of kindness? We need to get out of our own way and take that voice that's just so critical and so demeaning and addicted to this, and then and take that, and 5 times I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna sweeten it, and I'm ready to let go of that. I'm ready to be in the flow. I'm taking that willow, and just like that willow is in the flow, I'm taking that part of myself, and I'm bashing, and I'm like, I'm gonna be in the flow. I'm gonna be in water. I'm gonna be in a state of mind of receiving and giving, right? And not receiving from there and looking there all the time and self-doubting all the time because the inside is all out of line. I'm ready to be in line, in the flow, right? From the flow. And we do that on Hoshana Rabba. We do that on this day. This incredible, profound day that is, people think, oh, it's another day of judgment. But it's a day of great salvation. Hoshana Rabba. It's a day of great salvation. What is Hoshana is like, there's a Yeshua. Yeshua is like a salvation that comes down from heaven, and it's like so great. Hoshana Rabba, right? Are you ready to receive it for the year? We'll tap into it and get out of the way. Surrender to it. Right? Surrender to it. Allow it to be. And I think that's all. I think that's all there is to say. I think that yeah, Abigail.
I didn't understand the connection between booze and mayim. Can you talk about the letters?
Yeah, King Solomon says in Song of Songs that they will make fun of someone who is in love with God, right? Both they'll
But
make
what
fun.
letter for letter? How did
Booze is
Rabbi
bet.
keep a?
Oh, so the letters are bet, vav, and zayin, which are the second day, where there's a discrepancy in the reading of the sacrifices, where there's an extra mem. There's a letter yud, which is the extra, right, and the letter mem, which is mayim, right. So that's second, sixth, and seventh day, which is booze. Which in other words, we get mocked, but we're supposed to get out of our own. Find that source of water inside of us, and don't pay attention to what we perceive, because we're often not mocked. We think that we're mocked, and we think that this and that and the other thing is really going on, and it's all like
what book is it?
Song of Songs.
It's in Song of Songs. The description of the sacrifices.
No, it's not there in the Song of Songs. Rabbi Akiva learned it out, and he learned that verse. How do we remember the second, the sixth, and the seventh day with the discrepancies of the letters mime in it from the letters booze, which is bet, which is 2 in
now I
love is 6
understand
and
it
7. No, good.
And that's in verse 8 where we make fun of a person who give all his wealth.
Right. Give up all of their life. Right. Yeah. So mime is the letters were very interesting, is mem, yud mem, which is a palindrome, right? Water.
Either way.
Water stays in its source all the time. Right? When you have water down below, it's the same water that's from its source. It's not changed. It's constant. Right? Just like Torah is constant. It comes down from heaven, but it's the essence. And that flow of water and that joy of water is that connection to our source, of knowing that we are connected to that source, right? The majority of who we are is what? Water. Right? What are we? 80%, 90% water. 90% water. That's a lot. In other words, that's our biology, is water. Like, we are that on a biological level. Isn't that telling us something about our spiritual level as well? That if it's like that in our body, it's right. It's also like that in our beings, in our spiritual beings, that we have that sense of water that we are connecting to. And when is that joy of water? Again, the joy of water is during the holiday of Succot, but the culmination is right now, is this day, where we take all of everything that was accomplished, and we go a notch in, and we go all in. We're like, have I been imagining that it's just something which is a book which is just written about me, or it's my story, or am I the author? Am I the author? Or am I just waiting for things to happen? Or am I writing them? Am I in the flow of it? Am I feeling that flow? Or am I just like, no, I'm affected by that? And today's that day. It's a very, very, very powerful day. The most powerful day probably of all of Sukkot. So,
Rabbi,
yes.
yeah, first of all, amazing lecture. Thank you so much. Very
Baruch Hashem.
inspiring.
You're welcome.
One question and two comments. Can we drink coffee tonight to stay up? Like you said, wine. We're taking something in the outside to keep us going. So would that be an okay thing to do, like a Red Bull or something?
Of course. Yeah. Especially if it's good
Yeah.
coffee, right?
Okay. So the other thing is, very interestingly, when you were talking with the water from the inside, getting that inner water, the whole episode with Moses when he hits the rock, the Selah, is a
The
famous
water.
Vilna Gaon. When you spell Selah out, each letter Samech,
I want
the
to hear
middle
that.
letters Mem.
When you spell
Lamed,
Stella, what do
the
you
middle
get?
letters. If you spell each letter out, Samech is the first letter, Samech is a Mem. The next letter Lamed is a Mem. And then you have Ayin Yud Nun, it's a Yud. So inside of the middle of each letter spells water. So I'm just
Wow.
wondering if there's a connection with hitting the rock and drawing out the water.
Exactly.
And then he has to speak to the rock. So
100%. That's where exactly, and that's where Moshe actually got made his mistake, right? He got stuck because of the strike, because of not speaking to the rock and drawing out water, and by being affected by the people, right? By the outside, which is a very profound thing. I mean, he was basically he wasn't calm. Bottom line. I mean, we would all be freaking out, but we're not Moses,
so in
right?
a way, he lost his voice. In a way, he didn't speak. He lost his voice.
He lost his composure. He lost his. He became, and it's understood. We were like, "You're a human. We get it." But on his level, on Moshe's level, God said, "I expected you not to be affected and not to be reactive." Again, reactiveness. Where does that come from? From our own stuff, right? Our own 5 gvuras that are there, right? That are limiting. Whereas Hashem told him, speak to the rock, be in the present, be in who you really are, and that's what we're all going to. That's what we're all aspiring to. That's what we're all going to get to, right? As individuals, as a world, as a collective, we're all arevim zelazeh. We're doing it, but when we do our work, we're also helping the entire collective do their work, because we're shifting. It's how the outer world is shifting as well. It's not just the outer world.
It almost sounds like we're returning to our inner self, our child, our inner innocence, that childlike innocence
Exactly.
that we were born with before we heard all the layers of who we should be.
That's exactly it, which is what we do on Yom Kippur. Right? Haben Yakir Li Ephraim. God says, I love you like I love Ephraim. Ephraim is the biggest naughty boy, the biggest bad boy. And he's like, Ephraim is like going out there and like doing like the children of Ephraim, Yeravam, like splitting of the kingdom of Israel. Like they were doing idolatry and they were doing all this like crazy stuff. And God is like, I love you, Ephraim. You're a beautiful child. I'm looking at you as a little boy that's just mischievous. You're just a little bit mischievous, and you've got but it's the outside of you. It's not really you. You're outside. And actually, I like mischievous kids. Like you're not a boring kid. Like yeah, get into trouble a little bit. You do it. Like getting into trouble then gets you to dig deeper into who you really are. I was a mischievous kid. I was a good kid, but I was like, I think like getting into trouble is a healthy. Like, I try to keep that in mind when my kids get into trouble. And then I'm like, oh yeah. My wife is like, why are you like so upset? I'm like, yeah, you're right. Right.
One last comment. You're talking about the Ketoris and the clouds and the smell, the incense, of all the senses we have: touch, sight, hearing, taste, smell. Smell is the only sense where the nerve goes directly to the brain. There's no intermediary. It goes right from, you smell it, it goes right to the brain. It's the only nerve sense.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, that's coming from a doctor. That's pretty cool. That's pretty amazing. Is it an audio?
Thank you again,
An
Ralph.
audio?
Yeah.
Um,
And it's,
okay. So maybe we're gonna pause over here, and I want to wish everyone a beautiful, beautiful holiday. Last day of Hoshana Rabba, and a beautiful 8th day of Sukkot, where we go to the number 8, above nature. We realize our above natureness after getting out of our way. We draw down the above nature, and that's our nature, above nature. Ein od milvado. Hashemu Elokim. Okay, blessings to everyone.